I left Dublin in the autumn of 1940 with a battered suitcase and a head full of gears. The war hadn't touched Ireland yet, not the way it chewed up England, but the air still felt tight, like a spring wound too far. I'd spent the last decade fixing clocks in a cramped shop off Grafton Street, my hands steady with pinions and springs, my eyes sharp for the smallest tick. But when my uncle Seamus died that summer, leaving me a letter and a map to a bog in County Roscommon, I couldn't stay put. He'd been a horologist too, mad as a hatter, they said, and the letter mentioned a clock he'd built, lost in a manor out there. The Raven's Dial, he called it. I packed my tools, caught a train west, and told myself it was curiosity, not duty. The journey was wet and slow. The train rattling through fields turned to mush by rain. I got off at a whistle-stop station, just a platform and a shed, and hired a farmer with a cart to take me the rest of the way. He didn't talk much, just flicked his reins and stared ahead, his cap pulled low. The bog stretched out around us, a flat, brown sea of peat and reeds, the air thick with damp and rot. The village, if you could call it that, was a clutch of stone cottages and a pub, hunkered against the wind. I asked the farmer about the manor, a place called Dunraven House, marked on Seamus's map. He pointed north, past a stand of twisted trees, and muttered, "No one goes there." "Not since the Black Hour." I pressed him, but he shook his head and drove off, leaving me with my bag in the rain. I found a room at the pub, a low-ceilinged place called the Hare's Foot, and paid a week's lodging to a barmaid with tired eyes. She handed me a key and said, "You're the clockman's nephew, then?" I nodded, surprised she knew. "He came through years back," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Left that thing up at the house. Best let it be." I asked what she meant, but she turned away, busying herself with glasses. I took my bag upstairs, the stairs creaking under my boots, and spread the map on a wobbly table. Dunraven House sat a mile out, alone in the bog, its ink dots smudged like Seamus had hesitated marking it. The letter was vaguer, just a scrawl about the dial. "It keeps what it takes. Don't wind it unless you must." The next morning I set out, my coat heavy with damp, my tools rattling in my bag. The bog was silent, no birds, just the squelch of my steps and the wind hissing through the reeds. Dunraven House loomed ahead, a crumbling pile of gray stone, its windows dark, its roof sagging like a broken spine. The door hung ajar, swollen with rot, and I pushed it open, the hinges groaning loud enough to wake the dead. Inside smelled of mold and thyme, the air thick with dust that danced in the weak light. I stepped into a hall, its walls peeling, and saw it at the far end, mounted above a fireplace. The Raven's Dial. It was bigger than I'd expected, a foot across, its face black lacquer, its hands bone white and still. Ravens carved in dark wood perched around its edge, their beaks sharp, their eyes glinting with inlaid jet. I set my bag down and climbed a chair to get a closer look, my knees wobbling on the uneven seat. The craftsmanship was Seamus's, no doubt, precise and strange, but the hands pointed to nothing, frozen at an odd angle. I tapped the glass, expecting a tick, and heard a faint scrape instead, like claws on stone. One of the ravens twitched, its head tilting, and I jerked back, nearly toppling the chair. My heart thudded, and I told myself it was a trick of the light, a loose gear catching. I spent the day exploring the manor, the dial watching from its perch. The rooms were empty, furniture gone or rotted, but I found a study upstairs, its desk littered with papers. Seamus's handwriting covered them, frantic notes about the dial. Ticks back when it wants. Keeps the hours we lost. Another page, torn, mentioned the famine, 1847, and a pact. They gave us time. We gave them ours. I sat there, the bog pressing in through cracked windows, and felt a chill that wasn't just the damp. The famine was a ghost in every Irish family, but Seamus tying it to a clock felt mad. I took the notes and went back to the hall, the dial's raven still now, their eyes on me. That night at the pub, I asked the barmaid about Dunraven House. She poured me a stout and leaned close, her voice low. Was a landlord's place back in the hunger years. He left when the tenants died. Your uncle came sniffing after, built that thing. Said it'd fix what was broken. I sipped the beer, my throat tight. Fix how? She shrugged. Didn't. Just made folk nervous. Called it the black hour 'cause it don't tick right. I showed her a sketch I'd made of the dial. The ravens stark on the page. Her face paled. Them birds move, don't they? I nodded, slow. She crossed herself and walked away. I couldn't stay away. The next day I went back, the rain heavier, the bog a mirror of the sky. The manor felt alive now, its shadows shifting as I stepped inside. The dial was ticking when I reached the hall, a slow, uneven beat, backward from any clock I'd known. I climbed the chair again, my tools in hand, and watched the hands creep counterclockwise, the ravens turning with them. I opened the case, my fingers steady from years of practice, and saw the gears, black and slick, moving against logic. A hum rose, soft at first, then louder, and the ravens croaked, a dry, guttural sound that froze me cold. One spoke, its beak clicking. Patrick! I dropped my screwdriver, the clatter echoing, and stared. My name, from a wooden bird, in a voice like Seamus's, cracked and old. The dial ticked faster, the hum shaking the air, and I stumbled back, the chair tipping under me. I hit the floor hard, my tools spilling, and looked up. The ravens were still again, but the hands pointed to midnight, though the sun hung low outside. I grabbed my bag and ran, the bog swallowing my steps, the croak ringing in my ears. I understood something then, a sliver of it. The dial wasn't just a clock, it was a debt, and it knew me. I didn't go back to Dunraven House that night. The raven's croak, my name in Seamus's cracked voice, clung to me like damp peat, and I spent the hours before dawn at the Hare's Foot, hunched over a table with my tools spread out. The pub was empty, the barmaid gone to bed, and the fire had dwindled to embers, casting long shadows across the floor. My screwdriver sat there, its tip still dusty from the manor, and I couldn't shake the sound, that dry click of wooden beaks saying, Patrick. The dial wasn't just a clock. I'd known that the moment I opened it, saw those black gears turning backward. But hearing it speak turned my curiosity into something sharper, a need I couldn't name. Morning came wet and gray, the bog outside the window a smear of brown under a low sky. I packed my bag, heavier now with Seamus's notes, and headed out, my boots sinking into the muck. The village was awake but quiet, doors shut, smoke curling thin from chimneys. I stopped at the pub's bar and asked the barmaid for a man named Niall, an old peat cutter she'd mentioned once, someone who'd known Seamus. She pointed me to a cottage at the bog's edge, her eyes flicking to my bag. He'll not like you asking, she said, her voice low, but he'll talk. I nodded and left, the rain pattering on my coat, the dial's hum a faint echo in my head. Niall's place was a squat stone box, its roof thatched and sagging, smoke leaking from a hole in the center. I knocked and the door opened slow, revealing a man bent like the trees outside. His face creased deep, his hands stained black from years in the bog. He squinted at me, then at the tools slung over my shoulder and grunted. You're the clockman's kin, he said, stepping aside. I ducked in, the air thick with peat smoke and damp, and sat by a fire that barely warmed the room. He didn't offer tea, just watched me, his eyes sharp under bushy brows. I started simple. Seamus was my uncle, left me a dial-up at Dunraven. It's odd. Niall snorted, poking the fire with a stick. Odd's a weak word for it. I pulled out the sketch I'd made, the ravens stark on the page, and slid it across the table. It ticks backward, speaks too, said my name. He stared at it, his stick still, then leaned back, the chair creaking under him. Aye, it'd do that. He built it in '95 after the last of us starved. Said it'd fix what the hunger took. I frowned, the famine a shadow I knew but never felt. Fix how? Niall's eyes narrowed. Time. Gave us more. Slowed the dying. but it wanted something back. Always does. He tapped the sketch, his finger on a raven. Them's the watchers, keep the count. I swallowed hard, the hum louder in my memory. Count of what? He didn't answer, just stood and shuffled to a shelf, pulling down a tin box. He opened it, slow and careful, and handed me a scrap of paper, yellowed and brittle. Seamus's writing again, tighter than the notes I'd found. Dial set 12th February 1895. 3 lives for 3 years. They took it glad. Below names Mayor Kelly, Sean Doherty, Liam O'Shea. My surname, my blood. I looked up, my throat tight. My family, Niall nodded, grim. Your granda, Liam, gave his time so the rest could eat. Seamus made it work, kept it ticking after. I sat back, the paper trembling in my hand. A pact then, forged in starvation, and the dial its keeper. I asked what it took now. Neil's voice dropped. More. Always more. You're here, ain't you? I left his cottage with the scrap in my pocket, the bog pressing in, its silence heavier now. The dial knew me, Neil said, because I was O'Shea, part of the debt. I walked back to the pub, the rain soaking through my coat, and felt eyes on me. Not from the village, but the reeds, the shadows shifting just out of sight. That night I spread Seamus's notes on my bed, piecing them together. The dial slowed time, stretched days when the famine bit deepest, but the ravens counted lives, traded for each tick. Liam, my grandfather, had been one, and Seamus built it to hold the bargain. But it hadn't stopped. I found a later note, dated 1900, ink smudged with haste. It wants the rest. Won't let me wind it down. I rubbed my eyes, the hum of pulse in my skull, and knew I had to see it again. The next day I went back to Dunraven House, the bog a mirror of the rain-slick sky. The manor loomed darker, its stones slick with wet, and the air inside was colder, sharper, like something had woken. The dial hung above the fireplace, its hands ticking backwards, slow and steady, the ravens perched still. I set my bag down and climbed the chair, my tools ready, and opened the case again. The gears gleamed, black and wet, moving against all sense, and the hum rose, vibrating through my fingers. I adjusted a spring, testing, and the ticking sped up, the hands spinning reverse. The ravens croaked, a chorus now, their beaks clicking in time. Patrick, they said louder, and I froze, my hand on the gear. The glass fogged, then cleared, and I saw it, a flicker in the dial's face. Not a reflection, but a scene, faint and gray, like a film playing backward. A village, this village, its cottages whole, its people thin and hollow-eyed. They stood in a circle, Seamus at the center, the dial in his hands, its ravens alive and flapping. A man stepped forward, Liam, I guessed, his face mine but older, and knelt, his head bowed. The ravens swooped, their claws glinting, and the scene shifted, the crowd thinning, days stretching, food appearing where there had been none. The hum grew, shaking the chair, and the ravens spoke again. More, they croaked, their eyes on me. I slammed the case shut, the sound snapping off, and stumbled back, my breath ragged. I sat on the floor, the dial ticking softer now, and felt the manor shift, a low groan from the walls. Outside the bog rustled, reeds bending against the wind, and I saw shapes, faint and tall, moving through the mist. I grabbed my bag and ran, the rain stinging my face, the croaks fading behind me. Back at the pub, I locked my door and pored over the notes, my hands shaking. The dial had bought time, saved them, but the ravens kept score, and the debt hadn't died with Liam or Seamus. It had waited, ticking backward for me. I understood its hunger now, its need for more lives to stretch the hours. But how it chose, how it ended, stayed murky, a shadow I couldn't grasp. That night I dreamed of the bog, the dial floating above it, its ravens circling my head. They croaked my name, over and over, and I woke to the sound, real and close, from the window. I looked out, the glass fogged, and saw them, black shapes in the reeds, their eyes glinting jet. The dial's hum was in my bones now, and I knew it wouldn't let me go. The raven's croaks followed me into the morning, a sound I couldn't shake even as the rain eased and the bog settled under a thin fog. I sat in my room at the hare's foot, the door locked, my tools scattered across the table, and felt the dial's hum in my chest, steady as a pulse. My name from those wooden beaks, the glimpse of Liam kneeling in the glass, had rooted me to Dunraven House, to the bog, to a debt I hadn't asked for. I'd seen the pack's shape now, Seamus trading lives for time, stretching days to outlast the famine. But the ravens wanted more, and I was here, the last O'Shea with a pulse. I couldn't wind it down, not yet, but I had to know what it held. I packed my bag before noon, the notes and sketch tucked inside, and headed back to the manor. The village watched me go, faces pale behind windows, but no one spoke. The bog was still, reeds stiff in the mist, and the shapes I'd seen last night were gone, though their weight lingered in the air. Dunraven House stood darker, its stones slick with damp, and the door groaned louder as I pushed it open. The hall smelled of rot and something sharper, like burnt metal, and the dial hung above the fireplace, its hands ticking backward, slow and deliberate. The ravens perched still, their jet eyes glinting, and I felt them waiting. I set my bag down and climbed the chair, my knees steady this time, my tools in hand. The dial's hum grew as I opened the case, the gears gleaming black, moving against all reason. I adjusted a pinion, slow and careful, and the ticking sped up, the hands spinning reverse. The ravens croaked, a low chorus, and the glass fogged again, clearing to show the village once more. Liam knelt, Seamus stood, the crowd watched, but it played further now, the ravens swooping, the air thickening. Time stretched, days blurring, and I saw it. Food appearing, potatoes in hands that had been empty, children standing where they'd fallen. The hum shook the chair, and the ravens spoke, their voices overlapping. "More, Patrick, more!" I slammed the case shut, the sound sharp in the silence, and stepped down, my breath uneven. The manor creaked, a deep groan from below, and I knew it wasn't just the walls. Seamus's notes had mentioned a cellar, a place he'd forged the dial, and I felt the pull, the hum guiding me. I found a trapdoor in the study, hidden under a rotted rug, its iron ring cold in my hand. I lifted it, the hinges screaming, and a damp draft rose, smelling of earth and bone. I grabbed my torch, its beam weak but steady, and descended, the steps slick under my boots. The cellar was low, its walls rough stone, and the air hung heavy, pressing against my lungs. At the far end, a workbench sat, its surface scarred and black, the dial's birthplace. Beside it, a tin box, rusted shut, and a pile of bones, small and brittle, scattered like spilled gears. I knelt, my torch shaking, and saw carvings on the wall, crude but clear, ravens circling a clock. The hum was louder here, vibrating through the floor, and I pried the box open, my screwdriver bending with the effort. Inside, a ledger, its pages curling, in a single raven feather, black as the gears. I opened the book, the ink faded but legible. Seamus's hand listing names. Mayor Kelly, 12th of February, 1895. Sean Doherty, 13th February. Liam O'Shea, 14th February. Below a note, 3 for 3. The bog took them. Dial keeps the rest. Further down, 1900. It wants the line. I can't stop it. I sat back, the torch beam trembling, and understood. The pact was simple, brutal. 3 lives for 3 years, a trade to slow the famine's teeth, and the bog swallowed them, their time stretched into the village's survival. Liam, my grandfather, had gone willing, and Seamus bound it with the dial, the ravens counting the cost. But it hadn't ended. The bog remembered, the dial ticked on, and the line, my line, was the debt's tale. I touched the bones, a child's maybe, and felt the hum shift, a low croak rising from the walls. The shadows moved, tall and thin, circling the cellar, and I stood fast, my torch flickering. I climbed out, the ledger in my bag, and went back to the dial. It ticked faster now, the hands a blur, and the ravens turned, their beaks clicking. I opened the case again, my hands steady despite the shake in my gut, and watched the glass. The scene played once more, but different. The village fading, the bog rising, reeds swallowing the cottages. Liam stood alone, his face mine, and the ravens landed on his shoulders, their claws sinking in. The hum peaked, a sound like breaking stone, and the manor shuddered, dust falling from the ceiling. The shadows from the cellar climbed the stairs, silent and slow, and I felt them behind me, their breath cold on my neck. I didn't run. I stood there, the dial's face glowing, and asked, "What do you want?" The ravens croaked, a single word, "You!" The glass showed me now, standing in the bog, the reeds closing over my head, time stretching thin. I slammed the case shut, the hum dropping, and grabbed my bag, the shadows pressing closer. I stumbled outside, the bog alive around me, reeds rustling, shapes moving in the mist. The village was silent as I passed, the pub dark, the barmaid gone. I locked my door and spread the ledger on the bed, my torch dimming. The dial's hunger was clear, a machine to trade lives for time, and my blood was its fuel. Seamus had started it, Liam had paid, and I was next. I left Dunraven the next day, the train rattling east, the bog shrinking behind me. My bag held the ledger, the notes, the feather, but the dial stayed, ticking backward in the manor. Back in Dublin, I set up my shop again, my hands steady on clocks that obeyed, but the hum followed, faint in the walls. I dreamed of the bog, the ravens circling, their croaks my name, and woke to find the feather on my workbench, its edge wet with peat. I understood it then, the pack's full shape. The dial kept time, stole it, gave it back, a cycle tied to us, the O'Sheas, a debt the bog wouldn't forgive. It didn't need me to wind it, just to be there, the last tick in his count. Months later, a customer brought me a watch, its hand stuck at midnight. I fixed it, my fingers sure, but heard a croak as he left, faint and dry. I looked out, the street gray with dusk, and saw a raven on the lamppost, its eyes jet, watching. The hum was in my bones now, and I knew it wasn't over. The dial waited, the bog waited, and the ravens kept their tally. I'd seen its truth, held its cost, but the end wasn't mine to turn.